Today's conversation is about the recent canceling of several voice actors who portray characters of other races. One being Hank Azaria, who plays Apu on The Simpsons. I know we all have probably grown up with The Simpsons, and I haven't watched it in years just because I kind of am not a huge fan of it anymore. It doesn't really appeal to me. But Hank Azaria has played several characters from The Simpsons, and all characters we know and love, including Moe, Chief Wiggum, Apu, of course, who we're talking about today, the comic book guy, Carl Carlson, who is also an African-American, black, Cletus Spuckler, Professor Frink, Dr. Nick Riviera, Lou, as in Lou, one of the police officers, Snake Jailbird, the Sea Captain, Superintendent Chalmers, Disco Stew, Duffman, and the Wise Guy. And those are just like his mainstay characters. There's several one-time characters that he plays as well. But I think in recent weeks we've had several stories come out about how there are voice actors that are basically relinquishing their role on their whatever TV series or cartoon TV series they may be on. Some of those include people like Kristen Bell, and there was one other person, Jenny Slate.
That well-known artist, Jenny Slate. So glad she decided to display to all of us the morality that none of us have.
I mean, so what do you guys think? I mean, I know we'll get further into the discussion in a little bit, but what's your initial thought whenever, let's say, as far as Hank Azaria, whenever you heard that? I think this was a couple of years ago that he kind of let that out in an interview that he was contemplating, not doing the character anymore. And in recent years, according to a couple of things I've read up on, it sounds like Apu has just not even had anything to say in the last a year or two on any episodes of The Simpsons. So, what are your guys' thoughts?
I don't know. I feel like, okay, so I've been watching the show since it's almost its beginning. I think I didn't watch the first episode or two just because it was on the Tracy Ullman show, and my mom and dad wouldn't let me watch that show. But as it started, I think I was a fan at the beginning, and I know we'll go into a couple of pieces about this, but man, at this point, I do not watch the show because the show is just tired and old now. At least that's my opinion, right? But yes, I've noticed that Apu was obviously a blatant stereotype at the very beginning, and this is when I'm in younger years,
right,
in my preteens and teens, and I'm watching this.
Did that bother you at all? Was it something that you're like, oh man, it's just...
No, I mean, I don't think it really did at that time. I mean, I certainly recognize racism and stereotypes and bullying around your color. I mean, I was one of the few brown people in my school, pretty much predominantly all through my experience. So totally understand where people can use race as a way to kind of beat you down a little bit, but I never felt like when I watched the show that would be like, oh no, there's a brown person that looks so stupid, I'm in trouble. I don't get that.
Yeah.
And kind of to agree, it definitely was a stereotype, but I mean, if you look at The Simpsons, every character is a stereotype,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
it's like it's not like they're singling out a one minority, but with that being said, it's like, is there any Simpsons character you would want to be? I mean, the answer is probably no, right? Every character is supposed to be a joke of something, right?
Right.
So it's like, I don't know why one character is being singled out. Like Willie was the Irishman stereotype, right? The groundskeeper Willie.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's like, he was the drunk Irish person, but you keep up with it because it's funny, right? I mean, every character, there's no character where you're like in The Simpsons where you're like, I want to strive to be that in real life, right?
Right.
Like every character is a stereotype of something. So
that's a great point. I mean,
you don't want to be lunch lady Doris with a cigarette.
I agree with the rest of the group. I ultimately, the complaint was like, oh, well, it caused bullying, or it was contributing to bullying. And so I would say, yeah, people would say Apu or make the joke. Sometimes it wouldn't bother me. I mean, I know these two girls were doing that as a joke, and they were pretty, so maybe that's the factor that didn't bother me. But even then, I didn't take it as like, oh man, like this is a racist experience I had. I had racist experiences, and it definitely wasn't inspired by Apu. They just hated my color. So it was just like I don't see how it's going to contribute to what those people that cancel it see as racism, or it's going to help reduce racism. Because in the end of the day, my personal belief is that a person is going to act a certain way or make rude comments because that's just who they are, and it's not because a cartoon show made them want to be rude. They internally are rude in the first place. So I think it's a useless, or it's not going to accomplish anything by trying to cut out these characters, because it's not going to change the person that is bullying you.
Yeah, and like I was kind of saying, I think you can tell The Simpsons didn't have an ill intention. Like if it was a show where it was just singling out one group, and every other group is painted in a good picture, I think, that's kind of something that could be an outrage, right? But just the fact that the show by intent is designed to, have a town of all these misfits, right, is a sign that there wasn't a racist intent behind it.
So I think a lot of this conversation was, and the reason Hank Azaria kind of backed off of the character was because there was a documentary that came out by an Indian comedian. Ooh. I don't know if you could really call him a comedian, but he calls himself.
Yeah, I'm not booing his Indianness, booing his comedianness.
And so do you recall the title of that? What was the name
it's,
of it?
It's titled "The Problem with Apu."
Okay, his problem with Apu should be the title of that.
Yeah.
But essentially, I think he basically claims that it's a driver of bullying to him, as he's growing up or whatever. But like, you got a chance to actually sit down and force yourself to watch the documentary. So
would you be able to show the trailer just to give context to folks who may not know the show?
Let me play that real quick.
I hate Apu. And because of that, I dislike The Simpsons. The whole series.
Yeah. I love The Simpsons because
you hate yourself. My name is Kondabolu. I've had a great career filled with laughter, critical acclaim. I should be completely happy. But there's still one man who haunts me. Apu Nahasapima Pedalon.
Please pay for your purchases and get out and come again.
How many of you had to deal with being called Apu or that being referenced?
What woman was called Apu?
Stereotypes, all races.
So like two women raise their hands.
Any other representation? Cabby, deli. Doctor.
You know that a white guy does the voice?
Huh? A white guy doing an impression of a white guy making fun of my father.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, I'm making a movie about how much I dislike it.
Right away, they were like, can you do an Indian voice, and how offensive can you make it? I would immediately begun to talk this way. I was like, it's not tremendously accurate. It's a little stereotype. Like, it's all right.
They want the accent to sound like this, and they want your tongue to be really pulled back.
So Patay King was going into a room and having to do that exact thing in front of people like a monkey.
There are accents that, by their nature, to white Americans, sound funny, period.
It's funny because it's racist. Does Apu count as a minstrel since it's brown paint, a white guy's voice?
He has all the qualifications.
Remember, please, children, that in life, there is nothing that is not so disgusting that it cannot be sold on a heated roller at a nearly criminal markup.
Now, I realize some of you think I'm some annoying PC social justice warrior that's very sensitive, and you're probably thinking, come on, Snowflake, let it go. Well, I have let it go for 28 years.
All right. So That's the trailer.
It's funny. I listened to the end of the trailer, and he's just like, "I let it go." So you supposed to let it go. Like you're not. That means that you're not going to pick it back up again.
Right.
28 years you let it go. I'm like that.
It's like I let it go
Really
with
let
this
this go.
documentary.
Till now.
Yeah.
That I'm going to make money off of.
When I make money off of it.
Yeah. So it was like a 15-minute documentary, not as long as I was expecting it, with all the folks that he interviewed, and just 2 minutes of that trailer, a big portion of the video is that. So I would say like basically the video premise is that this comedian, he shares that ultimately his problem, and what he thinks is the problem that many people share, is that Apu for the longest time was the only representative of a South Asian on TV. And he didn't, he of course represented a stereotype, and South Asians never got a chance to really have any other representation. And so that's the assumption America had, or maybe it created the assumption America had on Indian and South Asian people. And some of the another, so they had that issue. They said that it sparked bullying, or contributed to bullying because of that. The other issue they had is it's like, well, there's a white person playing the actor's voice. So even the guy that did this documentary said like, I don't want them to take the character out, but maybe they have a South Asian voice it and maybe explore his character more. Which is another thing, is it's a comedy. And so he interviewed mainly actors, South Asian actors, and then he interviewed his parents, and then the Surgeon General for Obama for a few years. So he didn't interview any South Asians that are just normal day-to-day South Asians, that are not in the media. He did interview some people on the street, but no, I didn't see any Indians in his interviews. So that was one actually issue I had, is it's like, I would be really curious to see if he would have interviewed people like us, Asians, and get what their response. And so that's the basic premise. Actually, I did have a couple of questions, I think, just based on that, and I can definitely give more detail on the story itself.
I mean, like, at the end of the day, this is the problem with Hollywood and their depiction of, quotation mark documentaries. Like, it's supposed to be a representation of all Indians, and it's not, but they definitely portray it as that way, right? And then they take the most similarly minded folks as their focus groups. Like when they brought all the Indian, quotation marks again, comedians and people together for their little panel of Indian voices. I mean, it's all people that feel the same way, right?
Correct. So I would say, you look at the actors, surprisingly, even some of the actors like Kal Penn was like probably the most recognized face on there. I mean, one of his first breakout movies was he's on Van Wilder as a Indian South Asian person who is his tutor, and so playing fully to the stereotype. And so a lot of those actors, they played or made fun of Indian accents as a way to kind of break through. So even the comedian himself said that the guy that did the documentary said that, I would do a lot of the Indian accents and stuff at the beginning, because like that's like my way in to try to, I think he disclaimed on that that's the only way that people would, take my comedy seriously, is if I played on what people assumed about me. So a lot of these actors, not all of them, were banking on the stereotype. They played that. Now, all I'll say is that they would say like, oh, Hollywood, that's the only they would give us. They want us to play the deli worker, like that one actor who's been on a couple of movies, even like Spider-Man. He's played small roles. He shared that from 1991 to 1997, like all the acting jobs he could get were deli worker or cab driver, and so I would say Hollywood typecast South Asians, if that's where we're going. Like if you want to really look at who was stereotyping, it was Hollywood who said like, well, this is the only roles that we want to give you.
Right.
And Hollywood, I would think, is supposed to be the most progressive group or at least they portray themselves as a person. So that's an issue that they didn't highlight. Is like, well, is it the people that are doing the casting and making these shows, or is it the society, or are they blaming it? But one of the questions I asked, I think we did circle around though, is like, did you get made fun of because you're Indian or because of Apu specifically?
I remember distinctly. I was in 6th grade. I was 12 years old about. I'm walking down the hall between classes, and some random white kid is passing me by in the hall and is like, "Hey, I saw your dad at 7-Eleven yesterday or last night," or something like that. And I was like, "Oh, really? Did you tell him I said hi?" And I just kept walking, but then the guy's reaction was just like, huh? And just like, he was just kind of shocked that I even like played along with this dumb joke. But like, to me, I completely dismissed it because I was like, it didn't take much intellect to actually make a joke like that. It doesn't take much. I mean, I could make dumb jokes like that, but like, it didn't really bother me. I forgot about it. Like, I just kept walking. I didn't think about it. And the only time I ever think about it is whenever topics like this come up where they're, trying to cancel a character that I love on the show.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and kind of going with that, it's like, even if someone made a dumb joke, at the end of the day, they wrote Apu to the sense that you still like him as a character, right? Like, it wasn't just a guy in the Quickie Mart. Like, I remember that episode where he almost gets divorced and he's living with the Simpsons. Like, you feel bad for him.
Yeah.
So, when they say they're acting like it's a one-sided, image where it's just this guy to be made fun of. But I mean, like with all Simpsons characters, despite, the stereotype or the way they're made fun of, I mean, that was at least the beauty of the original Simpsons, where you actually still like the characters. Like, there was a emotional tie to them.
Well, I mean, every character on The Simpsons, like you said earlier, was like, it's a caricature of life, right? You're not expecting to go to your local 7-Eleven and see a person that's exactly like Apu. Right. And I'm not expecting to go and see a caricature of a black person when I see them in person. I'm not. That's the thing. Like, it's a comedy. It's designed to make you laugh and laugh at the absurdity of the character.
Right.
Otherwise, it will be a drama, which is this is what I'm getting. Like, it's The Simpsons. It's not. Like a daytime soap opera. It's designed to make us laugh.
Which is why, like, I when you mentioned that he was like, I don't want the character to go away, but I want him to basically portray, other scenarios of South Asians or, that. I was just like,
nobody wants to watch that.
Like,
even if you take the stereotype away and he's just the serious character, like, then he's not lovable anymore, right? Like, every character has to have that element of
flaw.
Yeah, flaw to them, right?
Yeah. Well, so they were like, well, he has not articulated it in the articles I read, but he's just like, we have him more developed. And I'm like, well, what does that look like? Because it's a comedy. Like, I'm not watching that. When I did watch the show, it wasn't a drama. It was a comedy that I wanted to watch. If I wanted to watch a developed character, I would watch a serious TV show. But the goal is to laugh and poke fun of it. Hey, yeah, the stereotype is based on that. There's a lot of Indian store clerks, but I did not feel like that was going to make me, dictate my life. So I don't need so here's the thing I would say, and I want to get y'all's opinion on this, is I believe that the people in this that had the problem and who had issues in the documentary see media as having such a strong influence on our culture, or has a responsibility. And so because of that, we have to change how the media portrays anyone, because that's the ultimate influence on society. And the way I see it is that, okay, well, the character Apu and the stereotype with him and people making fun of me did not dictate my life and what I wanted it to do and accomplish, and it really dictate how people see me, because I had that choice and I had the ability to make an impression on people, and not Apu. And so, in the end of the day, people can say like, well, Apu's the only representation in the media, but we have Indians across the nation who have represented us in a lot better light or who portray us. And so people have stereotypes of store clerks, but they also have assumptions that they're very smart or intelligent or doctors. And those are the people that really have built a reputation for the South Asian community and not Apu. And to the point where people understand it sees as a stereotype because they have South Asians to compare to and say, like, yeah, this is a comedy. Apu is not really like how everyone is. Because if the people that think this is an issue are like wondering, like, well, I don't see every South Asian that way, or at least that's my assumption.
But I mean, even if you felt that way, like we were saying, I don't think The Simpsons is the show to solve that issue just by the nature of the show, right? Like create another character that in a different type of show where it's more serious, you're trying to represent those issues. Like this, the solution isn't to cancel one character that everyone loves. So like the solution is now we don't even have him. He's not on the show pretty much.
The solution in the documentary's mind was having a South Asian do the voice.
What does that change about this? Get anything about this?
It's not like you're writing a different character. I mean, it's the same jokes, but you're just like, you just know like the guy voicing it as a South Asian.
If I'm South Asian and I just listen to my voice, like if I showed up and I'm Apu now because I'm a South Asian, how does that reflect the
I know that in the back of my mind that you're a South Asian and that now everything is better with the world,
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't get how the voice now. Okay, so say I do the same thing as the Apu character is right now. Use the same inflection in my voice. I'm a South Asian voice actor, and I say the same jokes. Like, does that change the bullying, nature of it apparently, or is it just because now that I'm officially a South Asian, I can say whatever I want? That's the problem I have with this. Is like it doesn't matter if what race I am. If I'm doing the same thing that you said was offensive, then why does it help?
Like when he said when he was in 6th grade, it's not like the person would have said, well, because he's a South Asian, I'm not going to make that joke. Like, the people would still make the joke even if a South Asian played Apu's character. Like it doesn't, like I feel like their solution and their problem don't even coincide with each other.
Well, yeah, and it does. He does talk out of both sides of his mouth. But one of the actors, he was saying like, well, I represent. I know my culture, and I should be able to represent it myself. So they really didn't dig into to that logic because it is said, well, because I'm South Asian, they should, or because a South Asian actor should play in a South Asian actor, and so. It's again they do talk about both sides of their mouth because they're like, well, it's causing bullying, but we want to have an Indian person do the actor and we want the character to be more developed. So ultimately they want a serious character that's being voiced by an Indian actor, and it really just defeats the purpose. But I think a lot of times it's just the goal is just to get their opinion out there, but not really develop it past getting it out there. And they accomplished that guy accomplished what he had set out to do, but it has not. I don't think it's contributed to any reduction of bullying or racism that he was saying that was his intent. So was to reduce that, but I don't see it. I mean, I don't question, or I try to give some. Attribute his desire to reduce bullying. But I completely disagree with what he thinks is going to accomplish that.
I guess going back to Jenny Slate, who voices, I guess, that character Missy or something. I forgot what show it's on. But I think the character itself, it has like a Jewish and a white mother or something. And she also happens to be of mixed race and has Jewish and white as her race, but the other half of that character happens to be black, and I think so her exact quote, and I'll quote her on this essentially, is she thought it was reasonable at first, but now Missy is also black, and black characters on animated shows should be played by black people.
Oh my gosh!
And I think that's kind of like what that side, and I know he says he's not, I don't know if he specifically said he wasn't left or liberal, but like I feel like that is kind of the push from that side, is that, you know, it has to be specifically a race to play another race, like that specific race. Like you cannot, you know, vary from that at all. Like, so
it's okay for a person of the same race of the character to make to say statements that are perceived to be bullying or perceived to be incorrect politically, but it's not okay for another race to do that. So I don't understand the justification. I really don't. So is it okay for me if I was a black person, I could do blackface, or is it okay for a black person to make fun of other black people? I mean, like, or white people to make fun of other. I mean, I guess, well, white people, you can make fun of anybody.
Well,
yeah. you can be made fun of at any time, apparently, in today's world.
And not only that, it's like okay, if someone says it's okay for an Indian person to make that joke because they're Indian, right? But is an Indian person really making that joke, or is it a different race of a writer making the joke? I mean, like, it makes no sense.
No, it'll go to that next.
That's the thing. Like, writers, now writers are going to have to be Indian or Asian or whatever the races of the character. So from a purely logistical perspective, is Hollywood going to be able to withstand the need for a character, a voice actor that is every race of every single person? I mean, like, the pure fact that The Simpsons, Hank Azaria is playing that because, hey, can you do it? Because we need one actor who can do multiple characters. All right. It wasn't like, we want somebody who has the best Indian voice. It was purely like, we've got like a few characters we want to pay for this show. We're starting out. Let's just have somebody do multiple voices. Otherwise, you got to have like 50 actors come in for all the races. Yeah. And then if you don't have in the show, because I don't want to pay for 50 different actors, I'm just going to have one white person playing the white characters. Then they'll be like, there's too many of one race in the show. It's like, okay, what can you do? That's a problem with this theory, is that you have to say, okay, we can avoid all the logistical problems because it's the right thing to do. Okay, I get that, but it just seems like it's just, where do you stop? What's the straw there?
There's a couple of black actors that I looked up. Like, I don't know if you remember Phil Lamar, who was on Mad TV way back in the day.
Oh yeah.
He plays like several characters, you know, like cartoon characters. You know, many of them are black, but there are a few that are white or other races. And one of them was like a very popular show. I don't know. I think it's on Cartoon Network, Samurai Jack, I think it's called.
Oh, okay.
And he's the voice actor for Samurai Jack. So, you know, he's playing somebody of a completely different race. And, you know, at that point, it's like, when are they going to come for a great actor like him to be canceled? Or I remember Uncle Phil, or I think it's James Avery, I think his name. He played Shredder from the original Ninja Turtles. And then there's somebody named Cree Summers. You most likely have heard her in several roles over the years, but you know, she's black, and she's, you know, done several white roles, like Penny from the Inspector Gadget. Elmira from what's that called? What was that cartoon?
Tiny Toons.
Tiny Toons. Like, she's that. But then she's also played other, you know, black characters as well. But like other, you know, characters across the board. There's several. I could go down a whole list of these, you know, other voice actors that play other races. But then, you know, at a certain point, we're like getting to just insanity. It's absurd that, you know, somebody can't act, because that's the whole nature of acting, as another completely different character.
Right. Right.
So I that's why I'm just kind of like, this seems like it's white people that essentially feel guilty for playing a black character, and it's almost disingenuous, or just putting down black voice actors. Like, you can't make it that well. You can't make it to the position I'm in, so I'm going to lay it down here for you. Like, it just seems a little off to me in that thinking that you could be like, oh, well, you can't make it without me stepping down, so I'm going to step down from this character forever now, so that a black person can, now voice the actor, or a South Asian can voice Apu. It just seems like virtue signaling at this point,
Correct. I would say, and this is in my opinion, that Hollywood is huge on virtue signaling. There's not a moral compass guiding them in making these decisions. It's more of a, how can we keep money flowing in? How can we keep our show on the air? And if taking out a voice actor to stop doing a character will help that, then we'll do it. Because he's playing Nick Rivera, a Hispanic person, and then I thought he played the Bumblebee Man, but like he plays these other characters, and no one's really complained yet. But this South Asian comedian raised it, put the documentary on there, so it's gotten the attention, and he even got his podcast listeners to send messages on Twitter to Hank Azaria. So that Apu character hasn't been voiced since 2017. I mean, he's appeared but not actually done anything. Which is interesting enough is that he interviewed his parents as well as I said, the Surgeon General, and both their responses were similar in the sense that they said that, hey, I had to work extra hard to set a different example, and to get into the position I was. Her parents, his parents actually even said, yeah, you could look like Apu, and they were making fun of him. And he asked them, like, well, are you not offended by it? And she says, like, well, when we first came to this country, like, we really couldn't focus on that. We just had to work hard, do as best as we could, and we didn't have the option to be offended. And instead and they're like, perhaps since you're an American citizen here, you have that privilege, you can be that way. But for us, that wasn't a priority.
Wow.
Which I agree that our parents and even ourselves, like we weren't bent on this character because it's like, well, I can progress and grow, and maybe I'm hitting walls because people see my color, but I can still get past that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest thing I had to worry about when I was growing up is like one or two people saying an Apu voice around me. I mean, like, I'd rather do that than living in another country that I've seen is horrible in a lot of ways, existence-wise. And there's people in my family that are so poor in the country that they're still residing in. And you see that, and you're like, okay, I'd rather accept one or two people being dumb and saying stupid things or teasing me, or I can just move forward. And like, I remember, and you're speaking about your growing up, the thing I remember is, like, I remember one Halloween I had a friend of mine who, for some reason, I don't know how they got this, but they had a 7-Eleven smock that they had. They knew somebody who worked at 7-Eleven, so it was they used to wear these button-down smocks that workers would wear. It had 7-Eleven written all over it.
Okay.
So she brought it to me, and I wore it for Halloween. People were like, people were like, so I really just embraced the stereotype, and it just made people laugh, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, that was it. That was the end of the day. Like, it wasn't like people were like, oh, you are Apu. I didn't have anybody say that. But, like, my point is simply, like, look, yes, there was people making fun of the accent or using that to tease me with over my life. But my gosh, man, like, if that's the biggest thing that happens to you, then you've lived a good life. If that's the biggest thing. Like, there's so much more worse to worry about. And I know my parents had so many more challenges that they overcame. But, like, in today's time to worry about that, I just don't see it. I don't see reason.
I totally agree with that. I mean, it's really sad whenever, we must be a very successful nation if this is like our biggest complaint right now is of a character on a cartoon.
Do you think changing the the voice actor that does Apu, or even giving him a more developed story arc, is that going to stop bullying of South Asians? Because it seemed like that was one reason.
No, yeah.
No, because the stereotype already exists for somewhat of a reason. I mean, like, and it's only based off of an existing stereotype, which...
It didn't start because of The Simpsons, I promise you that.
I mean, like...
It's because we all of our cultures would go for those positions or be in the Quickie Mart or whatever it is. It's not like it just appeared one day to Hank Azaria that we're going to make a character that works in a 7-Eleven type restaurant. Would you imagine the hilarity of that? Because that's never happened.
They are lucrative.
Yeah. That's true. Well, he was even saying that where he lived in Los Angeles, it was a lot of the store clerks were Indian and how they would act. And so he based it on that. But yeah, it was based on what he observed. And I see that even in where I live, there are South Asians that run the convenience store. I mean, it's just...
But the thing about the very nature of this documentary is that you have a non-Apu sounding lead comedian and his non-Apu sounding other comedians talking on the show about how they hate the Apu sound. But I'm like, you're there to show that there's other examples of people who don't speak like that or don't act like that. So why is that not enough to show the counterpoint? Right. Like, do you have to eliminate every single caricature and stereotype for people to understand it? No, you're literally a mainstream show that is. He's a comedian featured on multiple major networks. So the exposure of the American population to a non-Apu sounding Indian is there. I just don't get the logic that like we got to eliminate everything because otherwise people will be confused.
Yeah, the fact that he doesn't want the character gone, I think still using an Indian accent, it has not really accomplished it, other than the fact that they're just the race that was doing the voice is what he had an issue with, because he gives the reasons about bullying, but then he wants the character still on there. So it doesn't really, his issues don't really circle back into what it seems like the documentary was supposed to accomplish. Do y'all think that now we have they're saying like 14 major South Asians in Hollywood that have shows and successful shows and different things. Do you think that it has improved the impression people have, our fellow Americans have on South Asians?
I mean, to be honest, like, maybe I'm not as kept up with mainstream as that much, but I mean, Apu is still kind of the guy I think of, but I mean, it's like you kind of destroyed him now. I mean, but there was Kal Penn, who was pretty famous at one time, but I haven't seen him in a movie in a while.
What was that movie he was in where he was basically a stoner?
Harold and Kumar.
Yeah, there you go. So
great job.
Yeah, it's like so that's what you wanted to portray.
For advancing the Indian cause.
Yeah.
And in that he plays a doctor, or at least a candidate. His parents are all doctors, and they want him to be a doctor. Right. Like, this is the thing with these people. They want to be famous so much they're willing to take any role possible.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't have any morality in it. It's only become after they become famous, and they're like, now I can display my morality and show that. I don't get that.
The one Indian actor in Office Space, he probably had the only answer that I felt made sense. He was like, well, I go focus on trying to get these roles, and then with the writers, I may try to challenge them or say like, hey, can we portray this person this way? So like his style is just like getting these roles, but then trying to present a different view or encourage them or to portray them in a different way. So it's just like, maybe you can maybe that's something more accomplished or actually does something than just trying to change your character completely. And we have to take it with a grain of salt. This, you can tell the bias of this documentary is very clearly one-sided. He even made a very hard stretch about comparing Apu to blackface, because he's just like, hey, this is a painted character and a white guy's doing the voice. And then he had interviewed Whoopi Goldberg, who like has a whole collection of all these stereotype blackface toys, and her response is even like, I don't think those people that were doing those shows had like a malice. They weren't aware. They were ignorant of that, of how it treats or how it portrays black people. And so ultimately he tried to stretch it to say, like, ask her, like, well, do you see this as blackface? And then he says, like, well, he does dance, or Apu does dancing. And just like those people back in the 60s would have dress in blackface and dance, and, that kind of contributed to the stereotype of what a blackface character was. And so he even brings up an episode where Apu does that musical. And so it's just like he really tried hard to attribute to that. I was just like, man, it's not even that easy to determine what his views are because of how he just portrays himself, and people that he thinks don't agree with him, he portrays them as all these right-wing racist people, because you can see that even in the segments of his show. He'll have all those, like had Alex Jones, like all these different characters of them, and saying, like, well, this is everyone that's saying that's against my view, which basically he stereotyped anyone that is has a different view than him as white, far right-wing people. So it's just, there's a lot of hypocrisy, I would say, in the people that had issue of Apu in the documentary itself.
We should come out with our own documentary of interviewing people with the opposite point of view. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like, for a good documentary that I really get into, I'd like to see both sides of it. I don't know to what extent. Doesn't sound like he went that far into interviewing other people that have a completely different point of view of this, but it sounds like it was all one-sided.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate. I wouldn't say it was I would think there was a lot more content that he could have presented in his documentary because of all the people he interviewed and the things that he set up, but it was 50 minutes long, and it was lame. It was really scratching the surface of it. And when he did have questions that I was interested in, like, well, okay, why are you interviewing these actors who played the stereotypical South Asian, and they didn't dig into it? Say, like, well, aren't you?
Did he interview anybody that actually works in a 7-Eleven or has that type of role?
He did not. Again,
he didn't.
No. The only people that were, like, I would say normal in the sense they're not in the media and not actors was his parents, and then that Surgeon General.
Lame, man.
And they didn't really push on Apu as being a cause of racism. I mean, they dealt with racism, but they were saying that because of their hard work, they had to work hard and be diligent to get to where they were at. But they never blamed Apu or that character portrayal as keeping them from where they accomplished. Because, again, Surgeon General for the President of the United States. I mean, he's a South Asian American who actually became that person. And he said about his parents, like, they had to deal with that. But if you look at it now and, like, look at where he's at, and, like, did Apu, the caricature of Apu, really impact that? No. And I would say that there is a stereotype of South Asians as doctors, and they're all smart people, they're very diligent.
Oh man, that's the thing. Like, even the idea of a stereotype of a doctor. Oh my God, what a bad stereotype! A successful human being.
Yeah.
I'm so annoyed with this whole idea. Like, so what? Yeah. Like, how many stereotypes do other races have? And this is our worst one.
This just sounds like a really hurt little boy that, like,
No, it's a stretch to make a movie that people would buy something. They think like it's trash. People would buy that stuff.
Yeah, it was $5 for a 15-minute. I'm really disappointed.
You had to buy that, right? Like,
yeah,
because they bought the actual thing.
Well, you rent. I can rent it on it.
That's another thing you should be able to.
You could have bought it.
Not rent it. Buy it.
Observer
video.
Said you could have got a Subway footlong.
You can't even buy
That's true.
It's another caricature.
It would be
mad about Subway being a sandwich. That's a caricature.
Subway sandwich is a little bit more expensive, right?
Or Subway.
A little more, but I could have got a 6-inch. But it would have provided me more benefit because
more sustenance and enjoyment. And
yeah,
piece of trash.
I got what I paid for with that 6-inch long sandwich versus this. And well, going back to my question, you say that have the new now Mindy Kaling and Aziz Ansari and some of the other actors, have they because of their portrayal now is not the typical Indian, has that improved your ability to your standing, or how you feel personally your standing in your work and with your family or just with people around you? Has that improved your standing?
To me, it hasn't, but I don't watch any of those shows, so it's
well, no, I mean, like, with people, your general day-to-day people interaction, have you seen that improve because, like, hey?
Well, I think also, so yes, like I haven't heard an Apu joke in a long time, but I think also just as you get older, that stuff kind of dies out, right? Like it's more as a kid you hear those kinds of things, and as people get older, they get more mature, and you just, I mean, I couldn't imagine someone ever making a joke like that, in any type of work environment. I mean, you would lose your job, as opposed in school, nothing really happens. So, it's been maybe just because of my age now, I'm so far removed from it. I haven't heard anything, about it.
That's a good point. I mean, like, yeah, this stuff is like you're preventing stuff from happening when kids are goofing around or making inappropriate stuff because they're just not there in their life and experience to understand the difference between keeping their mouth shut or making fun of somebody else. Is that right? I mean, that's what ultimately where most of the stuff happened to me. Yeah, I would say 99% of stuff happened to me when I was in my younger years.
I would
but
say,
after I got to college, I didn't have anybody making jokes like this, and
I would actually say that was I was like, once I left high school, I don't think I've ever heard a racist joke, at least made, or at least even if it was made, it was in the jest of that they were a good friend of mine, right? Like I knew it wasn't like out of malice. Like you can usually tell if someone's trying to hurt you or if they're trying to just joke around with you, right? Like everyone has that ability for the most part. So
check your privilege, man.
Those two examples you mentioned, Mindy Kaling and I'm sorry. I mean, like, one, I've noticed no difference whatsoever. I mean, like, I can't. Like you guys said, and you already highlighted, most of this stuff has happened when I was much younger, and people grow up, or on the internet, which it's just obviously
it's probably
toxic.
Teenagers anyway.
Yeah, but like also those two characters don't necessarily represent who I am as a person either.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the roles that they've played, I wouldn't agree with a lot of the stuff they do. So. You could say that about any person, any character you see in TV or movies. I mean, they're not necessarily going to be, who you are as a person. And I think most people understand that, and you kind of take it as a person-by-person basis whenever you're interacting with people on a day-to-day basis. So I would say, I don't think they represent me, really. But two, no, I haven't seen any kind of major effect on interactions with people.
Yeah, I mean, like I've watched all these characters. Mindy Kaling from The Office when she started out there. I mean, these people have been given a lot of choices and options, and they've used them to their advantage, this is great. I mean, I'm happy to see those types of characters flourish on television. But like even Mindy Kaling, she had roles on The Office where she played a stupid person,
right?
And it got progressively stupider and stupider over the years. She became a caricature, right? So at that point, can you be like, well, she was playing a dumb Indian, so therefore, that's bullying about Indians, and we shouldn't have that? No. Right. I mean, like, she was playing a character that was, progressively or just making stupid choices. And that's the whole benefit of the premise of The Office. I mean, what's his name? Aziz Ansari. Right? He played a character that was just vain and focused on money and stuff like that. Again, a stereotype. So should we say like, well, that was stereotyping Indians too, so we shouldn't have that? Yeah. Like, this is my point. Like, these people all are playing in roles that are not them as a person.
Right.
And that's the unwritten contract we all have with these shows when we watch them. We're like, we know that's not real. It's a television show or a movie. It's designed to make us laugh or cry or whatever. So to expect that it's going to be reality and then therefore take it as we can't have it because it makes us all come up with a false reality. I mean, that's just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't. I don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, and we could always say that these, even before these characters are on there, because again, I agree. It's cool to see South Asian actors portrayed in a different way, but did it help me to accomplish, or did it help most of our fellow South Asians accomplish what they accomplished, or to reach the positions that they reached? No, it hasn't. Yeah. If there hasn't been a change in the stereotype of the store clerk, it's been because, or the assumptions like this is Indian South Asians are social clerks. The change came from South Asians working their butts off and doing different things and getting into roles that are influential or require a lot of intelligence because of their hard work and because of what their parents taught them. So I would say it goes back to, I think in the end, a lot of people in Hollywood or in the media feel like they have a very influential, important role, and because of that, they see that they need to be portrayed in a different way. But I don't think because I saw Mindy Kaling or Aziz or any of those actors saying like, hey, they have a big role now, I feel like I can accomplish more. No, it's because my parents and friends and people around me who are South Asian were accomplishing things. That's what really set the example for me. But again, it goes back down to Hollywood does feel like they have a very large role in influencing the culture. In some ways, they have an impact, but yeah, we have to look at back more of I think that's probably more of maybe they would say it's conservative view, is that the people around us or the parents have a better influence on, or should have a more influence on the people on your kids, and teaching them how they should be portrayed.
Well, I think we probably have said all we can about this dumb topic. So I think we'll leave it there, but I definitely want to, kind of explore that a little bit further on future podcasts, because this seems to come up like every couple of months, and it seems like it's becoming all the rage, in recent weeks. So, we'll definitely highlight this in the future, but thank you guys for joining today's podcast, and we'll see you next time.